All right. All right, there we go. Good morning, everybody. Double-handed wave. Nice. Hi, Roxana. Hi, Christy. Hi. Costanza, how are you? Excellent. All right. All right, here we are, class 7. And we talked about this last week a little bit, and I want to revisit us just for a moment. Um, so there's a lot of questions about how to look at the readings and how to use them. So let me tell you something. I will be honest that I haven't finished the readings ever for ACI 13. I've read the words, okay, but I haven't spent all the time on every single minor subject in those readings because it takes a long time. And so the way to really study those readings, it's not to think about like, oh God, I have to get through every single bit. It's like if I don't get to the end of it, I won't find out who did it. Right? It's not like the end of your novel, right? It's not like that. And it's meant to be slow. It's meant to be moderately difficult. Okay. And it's meant to make your brain think like, why is this even a question? Or why are we even talking about this? Like what's the issue here? And I really um started appreciating it more back in 2000. I don't know what year it was. 19. I don't know. So 2019, 2020, something like that. When it was definitely the middle of COVID, and I was sitting in class and I was doing my nerdy thing with all my tech and had my headphones on, like all the things that like Gina and Francisco do now, and Marina. And I was running all these classes, and I'm sitting in front of Geshe Michael. We're doing a mixed nuts class, our translator classes. And all of a sudden he was like, I've been thinking about adding another book. I want to add another translator. And then all of a sudden he was like, and Tim, here you go. And I'm like, I'm all like teched up, right? Like one ear is up, one headphone is up, and I'm like, what? Because I had been asking for quite a while. But I was asking for an easy text, right? I think I've told you all this story, but it's relevant. I said, can you give me a text that like you would get in 7th grade? Here's an easily written something that I can practice translating, not be a translator, but to practice translating. And so then he was like, yeah, here's the first debate, one of the first debate books. It's not the first one, but they spend years and years on the perfection of wisdom. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he said, this project's going to take you 50 years. And I was like, that's honorable, to say the least. Right. Um, Besides all the other things that were going on in that moment, what I started learning was the reason it's going to take 50 years. The language is actually not super difficult. Once you learn the structure of a syllogism, of a debate, the format relatively stays the same. I mean, it's not, they do change it from time to time, and then you got to figure out what the hell's going on. But mainly it's pretty straightforward in terms of structure, but it just takes time, right? It's just, you have to go by bit. When you start one of these syllogisms, there's always someone who shows up, like someone we call this person the kachik, which literally means what? Which literally means what? The kachik. You just because you pointed to your mouth, Roxana, doesn't mean anyone saw that. Ka means mouth. All right. Chick means one. Right. Oops. So it literally means one mouth, right? So it means that someone comes along and starts talking, right? They start, I like to think of it, they start running their mouth, right? And they say something, and they always say, in these formats, they always say something that's slightly incorrect, right? And we make fun of them, and this person's wrong, but really what they're doing is presenting a slightly wrong idea so that we can get at the right idea, so that we can understand why it's wrong. And so when you're going through the readings, that's what you should do. Come to a new syllogism, and it usually says something like, someone comes along and makes the claim, or someone makes the claim, something like that. And it gets translated differently because it gets boring. There's only 2 words in Tibetan, kachik. There's only so many ways you can say the same thing. But after they start the new debate, stop. Read the first line and stop. All right. Anastasia is like, but I want to finish the novel, Tim. I want to find out what happens. No, and then stop and think and say, okay, I know this person is presenting something incorrect. What is it? Like, what could it be? What could be wrong here? What could be erroneous? And then come up with some answers. Like, what is some counter example to that? What could be incorrect in the definition given? So you're going to be looking for all of the tools that we're talking about in class. You're going to be looking for, is there going to be a contradiction? Is there going to be what we talked about last week of my yingak? That by saying one thing, they're actually applying something else. Or if they don't have the full definition, that the implications are too large, or they exclude something, or they include too many things. You see? So then you become like an investigator. Okay, why? Like, what's wrong with this? Like, what's going on here? And then as you go through it, then you can start seeing, okay, what's happening here, right? And it could take you a whole session of sitting just with 3 lines. And that's why it's going to take my book 50 years, right? Because the whole idea around this is that each of those little sections is actually a full lesson in and of itself, right? And so there's always something in there that clarifies what the correct position is by presenting the wrong one. And we're not used to this pedagogical method. All of us go to school. You're not even used to it in ACI mainly. You come to school every couple days. You listen for the homework answer, right? And then you write down what the teacher says about it, right? And then you feel good about yourself when you get 100% on the question, and you feel like you learned something. I gave the right answer, right? It's called using dopamine to trick children into going to school all the time. Okay. Give them stickers. Oh, they feel good about themselves, right? Do more of it. Memorize more of what the teacher says. Um, and that's one way to learn. But memorization doesn't necessarily mean you learned anything. It just means you're good at parroting what somebody says. And then even you get so good at memorization that when you become a teacher, you say the same thing that you memorized 5 years ago. And I'm not accusing any of you of that, by the way. But it's not, it's there's a point where it needs to integrate, right? And integration, the way in this method is by giving you all the wrong ideas. So then you cancel all the wrong ideas out, and then you're left with our position. And hopefully by the time you get there, the logic has been airtight enough that you're like, I can't think of any other way that this could be. And then you start trying to figure out, well, what have I missed? And eventually you might come to a point where then you've canceled everything out, including something that everything that you think is self-existent. And that's the point. One by one, step by step, kachik by kachik, you're canceling out wrong ideas of how the world works. And you're noticing in your own mind where you hold on to it. And that's the psychology of Buddhist debate. It illuminates for you the places that you don't even know that you have belief systems operating. Right? And these belief systems are operating so much in the background that they inform so much of not even beyond decisions that you make, like the way you just the simple perceptions that you're having that are happening apparently before you make any decisions about something. Right? So it's a way to give you tools to look at yourself and your own behavior in the places that maybe are causing more suffering than you thought in you, in your reactions, in your perceptions. Right? And then we work through those things. So by the end of this course and by the end of your studies, and that because I know every single one of you from now on is going to open up your ACI 13 reading right before going to bed. And you're going to think about one of these debates. And why are you going to do that? Because you learned that that's the quickest way to fall asleep. Okay. Having trouble sleeping? Open up some logic. Open up some Buddhist logic, and all of a sudden all of your problems will fade away, and then you'll go off to sleep. And then you'll wake up in the middle of the night with the light on and your glasses are crooked and the book is like, right. That's not the best way to study, but it's actually a good way to get it in your brain. Right? If you put a cut cheek, if you put one full debate in your mind and then oops, you fall asleep, your brain's going to still think about it overnight. It's better than thinking about the last thought you had is like the problem you had with your partner last night. The perception you had of your partner who's a problem for you. Put a perception in your mind before you go to sleep that's going to help you. The problem you had with your partner last night and stewing on it isn't going to help you. By the way, don't go to bed angry either. It's not a good idea. At least try to commit to say to your partner, look, let's not be angry. Obviously, we can't talk about it right now because this isn't going to, we're uncommunicatable tonight, but, make some kind of commitment to resolve it. Right. And with love or connection or intimacy or something. So apparently Francisco doesn't read his child fantasy novels at night. He reads him Kachik's. That's amazing. Do you read it to him in English or Spanish?
English.
Even better. So the English he's becoming fluent in is anyway. Okay, that's enough. And each of these things they're not silly. Like even if you start with the Dora, which is Adam's text, which is where most like first grade of logic happens. Like the first debates are about like why red is not white and if red is a color. And you're just like, what is going on here? And I stared at this one for like a week and I'm like, this is level one. This is day one. Like, what the hell's going on in here? And, you know, and it ends up asking the question, is a color a color? Like what you think is a color is not a color, right? Is red a color? Well, if red is a color, then, it begs the question, like, then is it the same thing, right? Which one is which? It asks the question, is to be one to be the other, right? And so the debate starts with, well, red can't be a color because if it's a color, then it's not red. Using the word itself, like it's a set and a subset. Take all the colors in the world, red is one of them, right? But if you say red is a color, then you're saying red equals color. See? And if you say red equals color, that's not true. But our language makes it that way. And people speak that way, right? The sky is blue. It's blue to people who have sense organs that can perceive blue, right? But if someone doesn't have like a bumblebee doesn't have the same sense organs, they don't see blue. They see ultraviolet light spectrums. They look at the sky, they don't see blue. And that's why the bee stings you because it's pissed off that you keep saying the sky is blue and the blue and the sky's not blue to them. See, the bee is starting a war with you because you keep saying the sky is blue. Think about how many times you got upset because you heard this equals that. And you said, no, this equals something else. And then you started a war, even if it's just a little argument with somebody. You believed your truth equaled your truth. A red is not a color. Excuse me, red is not color. How about that? Right. But then you say, well, it is a color. Well, okay, well, in what way is it a color? And so that's how your mind starts sorting through the own idiocies in your own mind. Don't worry about other people's idiocies. They got plenty of them. Don't try to solve other people's problems. You can't change people. Even if you're a great debater, you still can't change people because debates don't have the power to change people. Oh, Tim, then why are we doing it? That's for our next class. All right. So today we're going to go into what sort of how this introduction went. So we're going to talk about different types of different types of things that the kachik might trick you with. Like that person comes up to you and is like, guess what? I got something for you. I got something for you. Right. And you're like, okay, what do you got for me? So here are some of the ways that your partner will try to trick you into believing what they want you to believe. The way that your mom will trick you into believing things that she wants you to believe. Okay. Advertising will trick you into believing something that's not true. Okay. And we have to be very careful when we say the word not true. Okay. It's also delicate. And I get accused of this all the time, and I don't care. Because the first talk about is contradictions. I get accused of contradicting myself all the time. And usually I'm like, okay, sometimes it's legitimate and other times it's like, no, it was on purpose. Okay. So this, a contradiction, right? Just, you know, the word is kelwa in Tibetan. Gelwa, excuse me. That was a mispronunciation. Kelwa is good virtue. Gelwa is contradiction. Very close in pronunciation. So we're studying this, we're studying relationships. Okay, we're studying the relationships between things. And what our kachik will say to us is we'll generally create some kind of relationship. And that's what debate is. That's a strange thing to say. I was gonna say something that I don't necessarily agree with. I gotta figure out why. Knowledge, okay, I'll say it this way to get myself out of the argument. Knowledge that comes from discrimination is all about relationships, discriminating between two things, right? We're usually comparing or relating or finding out what those relationships are. And understanding what those relationships are, of course, have an enormous impact on your understanding of emptiness and dependence, and an understanding of what's the relationship between dependence, seeds arising, and emptiness itself. Right? Emptiness itself. What is emptiness as in itself, right? Given that it's an absence. What's the relationship between the object you see outside, like this spoon, right? In the internalization of the perception of the spoon and seeing it in your mind. What's the relationship of that? And we talked about it in the beginning, right? We talked about chichedrak, like the relationship between outer objects and your perception of those objects. And is your perception the object, or is the perception something that happens with your sense organ and you're just looking at it in your mind? And if you're looking at it in your mind, does it exist outside of your mind? That's an argument that many people go down. If you're only perceiving images in your mind, then how could there be an outer world, an objective outer world? Is there even an outer world, or are you just living in your mind? This is the philosophy that happens when you're in college, and all the philosophy people, like I was, we all sit around and smoke cigarettes because that's what we used to do. And we were all cool. And we would drink coffees late at night. Oh, it's only in my mind. All of us are talking to each other about it only being in our own minds, right? And that's what you do, right? You tear it apart. So we're going to go into the study of contradictions, okay, where things are contradictory each other, all right? We're also going to talk about later, like how things have a relationship with each other as well, okay? So we need to have two conditions for something to be contradictory. And this is not a waste of time. Just hold on. Like, what is it that makes something contradictory? All right. What makes something contradictory? First, that the two things that are being evaluated. Okay. So there's two, let's call them objects, let's just call them two things, right? They must be separate and they both must exist, right? You can't contradict things that don't exist. Because you can't evaluate a contradiction between something that exists and something that doesn't exist. That makes no sense. Right? Like, let's talk about elephants. And let's talk about two-headed purple elephants. And then people get into discussions about the differences between two-headed purple elephants and elephants in Africa. Right? And they start debating between things that don't exist and something that does exist. Where do we see this all the time? Where do we see things like this? I don't know. Thank you, Delia. Fake news, right? Everyone in the United States is always talking. I'm allowed to talk about my country and make fun of it. I'm not allowed to make fun of yours. So you're the only ones that are allowed to make fun of your countries. Okay. Fake news. Okay. There's an obsession with ensuring that the things that we say are accurate. But it's twisted in, at least in the United States, it's twisted around what are considered, Julia puts in, alternative facts. Oh, you don't know what the truth is. And then I'm going to tell you what the truth is. Right. And then everyone believes, if you tell the story long enough, everyone believes the story. It's called propaganda. And, it's just another word for propaganda. Thank you. Governments do it all the time. The United States government does it all the time. And it'd be silly for us to think otherwise. And luckily, at least currently, I'm allowed to say those things openly for now and not fear that they're going to come to my house and take me away. But we don't call it propaganda anymore. We call it alternative facts, right? So we're blurring the line of fact with getting people to believe something that will incite a certain type of action from them. And if you hear the story long enough, you might start believing it, even if the fact checkers tell you it doesn't exist. It's not true. Facebook, Instagram, Meta ended their relationship with all their fact-checking organizations. The independent organizations that were fact-checking every post in Facebook and Instagram, they've terminated all those relationships. Oh, so we're not supposed to criticize people anymore? We're not supposed to check to see whether it's true or not? If they said it, it must be true. Better. I heard somebody say something, so it must be true. You see? You know, developing skills like this is not extremely popular, honestly, at least in today's current political climate. I would love to train a team of reporters to go sit in at a political news conference and start debating like this, like pointing out contradictions, pointing out mayingaks, implications of you say one thing but you're meaning something else, right? Watch some of these people squirm and get mad and then get emotional and then say the same fact again with high emotion. What is the definition of an invalid perception? Or definition of a valid perception? A fresh and unmistaken perception. At what point does your emotion overwhelm you that your perceptions are no longer reliable? Right? In the United States, we call it offense culture. It is it is culturally permitted without any investigation to take offense at something and then get extremely emotional about it and not think about it and then create a whole movement around it. It's okay. If you incite people's emotions, this is a study in political theory, I don't know, political discourse and rhetoric. Okay. I don't know. If you incite people's emotions high enough, they will stop having unmistaken perceptions. What happens when you get angry? What happens when you get sad? What happens when you begin to believe something is one way and not another way? Everything you see confirms your bias, and things that fall outside of it can't exist for you, because if you actually thought that they existed, then they would challenge your bias. They would challenge you. And that's what I'm challenging you all, is to challenge your own biases about the way the world works, including everything from worldly things all the way to ultimate things. I fear we have lost the bet. We're at 80 people. I have officially turned people off to logic. Made it to 7 classes. Okay, that's not bad. We still got 80 people, right? But yeah, like what happens if you challenge your belief system just a little bit too much? It gets uncomfortable, right? And then, you know, if it gets too uncomfortable, then you stop engaging or you go to the place you are most comfortable. It doesn't feel safe anymore. You see, when a bunch of monks start out the Geshe program, you know, maybe 4 or 5 finish, right? Because it gets too intense, because you have to be willing to challenge everything you thought that you have to be willing to challenge everything that you thought you are. And the moment things, you know, that's why people get afflictions. That's why they get They have meltdowns. That's why they get angry. That's why people leave, right? It's too challenging. And that's why ACI 13 is too challenging sometimes, because then you're forced to look at things you didn't know you even had you're forced to look at things you didn't even know that was there to look at, right? So that's the first. Let's go back here. So the first quality of a contradiction is that it has to be two things. It has to be separate, two things, and they must both exist. That was a long deviation, a long, like, what is it called? One of my favorite teachers does this. He'll say one point, he'll go off on a tangent, and he'll come back to it, but he doesn't keep going. He just does this circle thing, because sometimes we learn more that way. Second thing is no one thing can be both things at the same time. So what I mean is that you can't have a contradiction with something that is both things at the same time. You have two separate things that cannot be the same thing. Like you can't have a contradiction between a spoon that's the same spoon. Okay, it's kind of the same definition. It's just two different ways of looking at it. Like it can't be the same thing, and it has to be something that's different. And sometimes when we think of conceptualize the same thing in two different ways, there's something important about emptiness in there. If you can arrive at the same concept in two different ways, there's something about emptiness in there. What's next? So now we're going to go into what kinds of contradictions. There's two different types of contradictions. So I just gave you what makes for a contradiction. And the first one is called mutual exclusivity. Okay, what does this mean? So here we go. One second. Okay. All right. So here's a coffee cup. All right. Let's take the coffee cup. What's something that's contradictory to the coffee cup? And this is a very, very important point. Everything that's not the coffee cup. Okay, so you have coffee cup is mutual exclusivity. Everything that's not the coffee cup. So if you use the word everything which is not the coffee cup. So start getting used to this language. And it will help you tremendously to see emptiness, to understand the true meaning of it. You have a coffee cup, and then you have everything that's not the coffee cup. So in that set of coffee cup, everything which is not the coffee cup, What do we have? Coffee cup plus everything that is not the coffee cup equals what? Everything there is, all existing things. Okay. So you're working with the set of all existing things. The coffee cup plus everything that's not the coffee cup has to equal infinity. Okay. Has to equal everything there is existing in the universe. That's a lot of things. Lauder's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Mind blown, right? So if you wrap your mind around that, oh, you guys, I hate this question. Oh, okay. The question is, does it also include all imaginary things like two-headed purple elephants? Your imagination exists, but the two-headed purple elephant doesn't exist. How about that? The things you imagine exist, but the things of the imagination exist, but the things in the imagination do not exist. Maybe, or things in the imagination exist and things of the imaginations don't exist. Something like that. Your imagination exists. What you imagine may or may not exist, to include the set of all possible things. You got to think about it. Okay, so what are some kinds of contradictions? All right. Careful, Roxana. We're in the second school right now. Careful. I'm flirting with both, by the way, when what I said. And that's why you need to learn all the schools. Okay. Things that are mutually exclusive. Take changing things. What is something that is mutually exclusive of changing things? Mitakpa. Unchanging things. Takpa. Okay. Mitakpa. Wow. What ends up happening is your brain shuts down at one point. Right. Takpa is impermanent. Not, excuse me, Takpa is unchanging. Not unchanging is changing. Okay. And there's a reason why it's said that way. Unchanging things, Takpa, and then unchanging things is Takpa. Changing things is not unchanging things in Tibetan. All right. So those are mutually exclusive. What else is mutually exclusive? Let's take unchanging things. We have what's an indirect mutual exclusivity of, there you go, Mike. Good. Indirect mutual exclusivity of an unchanging thing would be a made thing, a working thing. So the first one was a direct mutual exclusivity, changing and unchanging, opposites, literally opposites, right? Then if you say unchanging and functional things or working things, a made thing, a functioning thing, a working thing, and a changing thing are all the same thing. but it's not quite as obvious, I guess. That's what they say anyway. We can debate it later on the debate ground. So another good example would be cold, like coldness. And as an indirect, like direct would be hotness. Okay. A direct mutual exclusivity would be hot and cold. Indirect could be coldness and a cloud of smoke in Los Angeles. Why? Consider a smoky pass. There must be a fire because there's smoke. Did you forget last week? Last Monday? 4 days ago? 3 days ago? Right? One requires indirect requires some kind of deduction, right? So coldness and a, a lot of smoke are kind of at odds, but are mutually exclusive because there's a fire. Now, what if the smoke has traveled 300 miles, is just hanging out in your valley like it is right now? Okay. Is cold and smoke mutually exclusive? You can take that one in the debate ground. I'm not going to argue that one with you. And the reason we call it indirect sometimes, like between, let's say, unchanging thing and a made thing, is that the mental image that comes to mind is distinct. Okay. The fact that working things, changing things, made things, the mental image we have is something that differs. So just got to think about it. All right. Those are different kinds of contradictions. There's direct and indirect, right? And so some examples are changing and unchanging things, changing and working things. Okay. And I'm going to be honest about the next one. I don't really feel that big of a difference. And maybe you can feel it more than I can. Another type of contradiction is called diametrically opposed. Okay. And you have to think about it a little bit. So here's an example. You have a personal negative quality in you. Okay. Let's say, mm, oh, now I understand. Okay. That's funny. It's funny when you're just like, oh, I found the example. Okay. Okay. Let's take two things. Here we go. Diametrically opposed. Okay, let's take two things. This is a rough example, so just bear with me. So let's take sexual misconduct. You're experiencing some kind of sexual misconduct in your world. Excuse me. You have the seeds to experience sexual misconduct. Okay. Obvious forms of that would be like, oh, people cheating on each other, right? Or people hurting each other through sexual abuse or something like that. But let's take the smell of urine when you get out of the subway in New York, which is prevalent. Okay. If you've ever been to New York, although not all parts of New York are this way, you know, you just smell like the smell of urine and feces and all, like it's just like in the middle of a city and it's like it's overwhelming, right? Or you turn down an alleyway and it's just disgusting. Okay. What's diametrically opposed to the smell of urine? Respecting other people's relationships. I'll say it again and then I'll explain it. You get out of the subway in New York and it just smells like someone took a big dump. Okay. And I'm going to say it like that because it's, just to get like the feeling, right? What's diametrically opposed to that is protecting other people's relationships. Yes, Roxana. Okay. The karmic cause, the karmic result of sexual misconduct are those types of things in your environment. All right. I had a direct experience with this actually when I got home from Kyoto. Like I was I was driving and I had an opportunity to practice the opposite of sexual misconduct. How about that? I had a very strong opportunity to engage in the opposite of sexual misconduct. I mean, it was strong, like very, very like intense, right? And I did a good job. Right. I was like, good job, Tim. Right. Knowing that I was planting a very, very powerful seed. So I got home. My friend was here. She has a dog. Dog super happy to see me. She and her partner were watching my cats. Thank you. And they went out to dinner and left the dog with me, which I love. His name is Hendrix, like Jimi Hendrix. My cats hated him, but that's a different story. So then dog starts acting weird. And then I'm like, that's weird. And then the dog stops acting weird and just kind of lays down. I'm like, okay, Hendrix is a weird dog. He won't walk on a floor without a carpet. He's afraid of floors without carpets. So I just thought he was having his one of his anxiety moments and fine. So I went into my room and I was like, oh my God, that's terrible smell. Like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, I'm jet lagged. I'm like, all right, whatever. And I left and then I came back and I was like, there's something seriously wrong in here. And I walked around my bed and Hendrix had dropped a big dog duty right up next to my bed. Like borderline diarrhea, disgusting, like and enormous too. Okay. And these things when you're jet lagged are just like out of this world. Like, what the fuck is happening in right now? And I looked at this and I was like, this is gross. Right. And it's also next to my bed. And of course, he did it on the carpet. He didn't do it on the floor without the rugs. That would have been nice. Right. And and literally, like, this is what Buddhism does to you. I was like, yes, that's a purification. I planted a really good seed a couple hours ago, really strong seed. right? Positive seed. And now I'm purifying some of the old stuff, right? You know, that's all you need to know from that story. Yes, I cleaned it up. And yes, I had to get the carpet cleaner out. And yes, it took me anyway. The carpet's fine. Hendrix was fine. But like a spiritual antidote is diametrically opposed to the negative emotion. That's what that diametrically opposed means. Because they're not mutually exclusive. It's not like unchanging and changing things, right? It's like the antidote to having stinky, smelly things around you all the time is to clean up your behavior towards other people's partners, other people's partners who are in committed relationships, right? People who don't want to be looked at in a sexual way or in a seductive way or anything like that, right? So you want to stop having smelly things in your world? Just look at your behavior, right? And maybe you're great now. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and I was like, why do I have to see this? So they asked me, why do you have to see this behavior? And I said, because that's exactly what I did in my 30s, all of my 30s. Okay. I was that person. I was that person who thought he knew everything. Therefore, I have to see that, right? 10 years. And I'm still kind of prideful a little bit, but not as bad. You see, you might be a good person now, or you just have seeds from previous life. So who don't judge the person, don't judge if you just walk into a house and it smells like dog poop. Okay. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge the people in the house for that matter. They may not smell the dog poop. Have you ever been to someone's house who has like 20 cats? It's kind of, it has a particular odor, right? But I don't think the crazy cat person who has 20 cats is smelling it, right? So they may not be experiencing, you're the one who's experiencing the sexual misconduct ripening, not them. They're providing you an opportunity to clean up your negative scenes. Okay. Go to some crazy cat lady's house to purify your negative sexual misconduct seeds from lifetimes ago and just enjoy it. Okay. Something like that. But those things are diametrically opposed. Dang it. Okay. So, for example, other ones like death meditation eliminates laziness. Meditating on how somebody's body will rot eventually eliminates your desire for the sense objects. They're pretty now, but then there'd just be a pile of bones in their coffin at some point. Okay, so be careful what you're attracted to, right? That's what they say anyway. Maybe it won't be like that. So, what it means, and you can think of it this way, is that it's the kind of contradiction that one object gradually removes another object. Okay. Like, that's not a nice example. One object removes another object gradually. That's what they mean by diametrically opposed. All right. Let's move on. we're going to talk about different types of relationships now. And I found a relationship emoji, which is going to help us. All right, here's a relationship emoji. Love. And it's not about love here. I mean, it could be, I guess. Now, there's two types of relationships. All right, relationship one is when there's two types of relationships. And this one is when one thing is automatically the other. Okay. And we've already studied this. For example, to be a car, if something is a car, it is a Ford. Okay. Excuse me. Rephrase that. That was not exactly correct. If something is a Ford, it's automatically a car. If something is a Mercedes, it's automatically a car. Okay. If something is a car, is it automatically a Mercedes? Yes or no? If something is a car, is it automatically a Mercedes? No, because all cars are not Mercedes. If all cars were, then they would be the same thing. Right? It's like saying all fruits are bananas. No, a banana is a fruit. Are all bananas fruits? I think so. I haven't seen an example of a banana that's not a fruit. Let's see. So we're talking about relationships. Some relationships can be both ways, and some relationships can be one way. Okay. So, for example, to be a changing thing is to be a made thing. To be a made thing is to be a made thing a changing thing. Okay. In that case, the relationship is automatic in both directions, right? To be one is to be the other, and to be the other is to be one. Okay. Other relationships are only one directional in this case, right? To be a Ford is to be a car. But the other direction, to be a car is not necessarily to be a Ford. Right. So that's one type of relationship. The other type of relationship is cause and effect. Where one thing, hold on a second here, comes from the other. And this can only be a one-way relationship. So the primary example is a working thing in the moment after and the original working thing. I was like, what? Let's do that again. What? Okay, one more time. Let's make it easier. Here's a spoon in moment one. And then I have the spoon in moment two. Okay. The working thing in moment one is the cause. Careful, but we're going to use it in this example for the working thing in the next moment. But the working thing in the next moment is not the cause of the working thing in the previous moment. The spoon in the second moment is not the cause of the spoon in the first moment. because the spoon in the second moment doesn't yet exist, and it won't ever exist. It can't be a cause of something. The cause can't come from the future unless you have a DeLorean time machine. That's a different story. Okay. But the moment of the spoon of the second moment can't be the cause of the spoon in the first moment, because in the first moment, the spoon of the second moment doesn't exist yet. Sorry, Brian, was that too hard? Okay. All right. So cause and effect is only one way. So I want to go back to this other one, the one that is automatically the other. When being one is automatically being the other. Brian, don't get all Nagarjuna on me. All right. Brian asked a question about like, how can the cause be the cause of something if it never touches the result? Because if the cause and the result touched it, if the cause actually created the result, then the cause would have to touch the result. And if the cause is touching the result, then the cause and the result are the same thing. Just watching translators. Okay. And we're not talking about that right now. Okay. We're talking about logic schools right now. We're in the logic school. Okay. But those kind of questions eventually come up. All right. So I want to talk about this other relationship of being one is to automatically be the other. And specifically, there's one that I want to talk about. Right. So, for example, you can apply the relationship in a contradiction, right? If I say consider all existing things, and then I say, consider all changing things. All right, just take the world of all existing things, and then let's take the world of all changing things. The world of all existing things is contradictory to being all changing things. Make sense? All existing things is contradictory to being all changing things. Why? Because all changing things plus all unchanging things equals all existing things. Right? I'm excluding something, right? A contradiction. All existing things is contradictory to all existing things. But it's a one-way relationship. Being a changing thing is not contradictory to being all existing things. And you got to think about that. Okay. One-way relationships. So that's how these two are coming together. All right. One more thing. And this what I'm going to say right now. Call all your friends, get us up to 100 people. This is the point that you need to understand. Okay. This is the point you need to understand for using the logic schools to see emptiness directly. Okay. So forget about everything else, but you needed everything else to understand what I'm going to say right now. Okay. So, first of all, this is what we do in all of our classes now. I want everyone to stretch. You've all been sitting for an hour and 11 minutes, sometimes more. So everyone stretch your arms. We're going to do a twist to the left. We're going to untwist our. Okay, then Julia, curl up into a fetal position. Right. Do some twists here. Extend your spine forward. We're going to open up the channels a little bit. Well, then stretch yourself out long. Okay, right? This is the way to understand emptiness is to do yoga beforehand. And I'm not joking either. I've been going to classes every night for like 4 hours, and I go to the gym beforehand. And it helps because first of all, you're moving your prana, but you're unstucking your prana and you're letting go of all the negative emotions that you have. And I can see the negative emotions in some of your faces. Okay. I can see it. You're not going to see emptiness directly if you're having a negative emotion. It's impossible. My teacher told me one day, I will only teach you when you're happy. So here we go. Let's consider the coffee cup. Okay. Okay, here's your coffee cup. All right. We have two things here. The coffee cup. And now listen to these words carefully. Translators, I'm going to put it in the chat so you can hear it. As, what am I going to say here? Hold on a second. That didn't work. Okay. So let's take the coffee cup. And the reverse of all that is not the coffee cup. Right. We'll do that again. We got two things here. Before, right, we had two mutually exclusive things. We had coffee cup, and then we had all that is not the coffee cup. Okay, we had coffee cup and all that is not the coffee cup. Right? Everything that's not the coffee cup plus the coffee cup equals all existing things. Now we have something, we've added one more thing. We have, if you look at it, all that is not the coffee cup in the reverse of that, dokpa, the opposite. The reverse of all that is not the coffee cup and the coffee cup. Okay. The opposite of all that is not the coffee cup equals the coffee cup. I'll say it again. I see a few, like I see the light bulbs. It's like they're going on. No, but seriously, struggle. Get this. We have two things, mutually exclusive things, a coffee cup and everything that's not the coffee cup. Okay. Let's do it this way so I don't give you the middle finger. The coffee cup and all that's not the coffee cup. Okay. The opposite, the reverse of everything that's not the coffee cup is the coffee cup. Honestly, I couldn't, no matter how I did it, I was wrong. For those of you that saw it. The reverse, the opposite of everything that is not the coffee cup is the coffee cup. All right. I got some nods now. We're getting some. Okay. All right. Those are two different ways. Exactly, Jessica. There's advanced level, DCI advanced level 2. There are two ways to get at the same thing. There's two ways to conceive of this same object. In quotes, I'm going to call it in quotes, same object. You can say, honey, could you get me the coffee cup? Sure. Goes to the cupboard, goes get the coffee cup. But if you say to your beloved, could you get me the reverse of everything that's not the coffee cup? I mean, that might be sexy for some people, right? Oh, talk to me dirty. Okay, just stop there, Tim. Okay, talk to me dirty. Go get me the reverse of everything that's not the coffee cup. Good. I can see the Vietnamese translator did a good job because they're laughing now. Good job. Okay. You see. So you get at coffee cup in two very different ways. You get to the coffee cup in a just using a word, coffee cup. Or you get to the coffee cup by canceling everything that's not the coffee cup. Excuse me. Let me try this again. You take the cancellation of everything that's not the coffee cup, and then you apply its opposite. So in the logic schools, the way that we understand how we perceive something is through that process. The way that I perceive the coffee cup, this used to be my favorite cafe in Sedona and they closed. So the way that the coffee cup became the coffee cup in your perception is that you canceled everything else that wasn't the coffee cup. Not a banana, not a spoon, not a cell phone, not eyeglasses, not dirty talk, not, not water, all of those things. And that's how you arrived at the coffee cup. You canceled every other existing thing in the universe. And that cancellation made the coffee cup. It is everything that it's not. You see. So, how does this get us to emptiness? Okay. If you try to understand that the coffee cup is the reverse of everything it's not, the coffee cup, right? I want you to try this with your beloved. Honey, can you get me the reverse of everything that's not the coffee cup? See what happens. Right? You've canceled everything, right? You've canceled everything it's not to get to what it is. So, how do you create the perfect image in your mind? Brian, I give Sharon permission. I will call her. Okay. How do you create How is this practical? Okay. How do you, let's say, let's get out of philosophy for a second. How do you get what you want? Okay. Let's just make this simple. How do you get what you want? Oh, Tim, I know the answer to that. Seeds. Oh, God, thank God. Right. The answer to everything, Tracy, is seeds, right? Right. I just made it easy. All of a sudden, people are using the chat. Excellent. Seeds, 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 right? Plant seeds, do the 4 steps, right? How do you get what you want? Okay. You got to give it to somebody else. True. But if everything is if let's go to the highest school right now and shit, hold on. How much time do I have before I do this? That'll be fine. We'll just go to the next class. Okay. So how do you, if everything, like you're looking at the stove and you're looking at the pot on the stove, right? And you see a perfect pot, right? We already discussed this. You're not seeing the pot. You're seeing some indicators. You're seeing some round. You're seeing a stick. You're seeing some indicators of a pot, right? And then a karmic seed opens up. We're out of the logic schools now. Forget about everything I just said. Actually, don't forget about what I said. And then the perfect image shows up in your mind. Pot. Perfect pot, right? And that image opens up and projects, okay, onto the pot. Okay. Hold on a second. This is important. Okay. Sorry. The image in your mind is the perfect pot. And so how do you get more pots? Okay, plant seeds, do all those things. Go to the nursing home, take care of your old lady. Your old lady calls you to take her to Peachtree, hang out with her a little bit. 85 years old, her husband has died, her children aren't around, take care of her, right? And that will create seeds for partnership. And I'm not being flippant either. But then you ask the question, well, what kind of partner? Is your 100% partner the same as someone else's 100% partner? Right? How are you going to fill in all the details? Right? How are you going to fill in all the details of your perfect partner? By properly, and you shouldn't be thinking about you're going to get a partner when you take your old lady to Peachtree Cafe. I'm just thinking about happy. She's so happy. She's so happy, right? How do you create the perfect image in your mind, and how do you get that image to come out? Right? Logic schools cancel everything it's not. What do you mean, Tim? Okay. Well, when you make your list of what you find perfect, let's say perfect world, because I hate this idea of like, let's limit ourselves to a perfect one person. It's a perfect world, right? What do you want in your perfect world? And what don't you want in your perfect world? But let's go back to partners. What don't you want? Right? What qualities don't you want to see? If you don't want a partner that asks you to get the reverse of everything that's not the coffee cup every time they want a coffee cup, okay, as an example, right? So take the mental image of the thing you don't want and cancel it. If you don't want someone who's, let's say, overly critical, right? You don't want someone that yells. You don't want someone who's not sexy to you. Okay. So you start all these images of things that they're not, you cancel. I don't know. If you're looking for a spiritual partnership, you're going to cancel all beings who are not already enlightened, right? Then you got to determine how you determine, then you got to figure out how you determine that. But that's a different story. Okay. And be careful if if that's what you want. Okay. That's not going to be an easy path, right? How do you transform someone into normal and who appears normal and turn them into an appearance of an enlightened being? Cancel all the normal perceptions. How do you cancel those normal perceptions? Right. And then you know what seeds not to do. Then all of a sudden you have a list of things not to do. If you want a partner who doesn't yell, then stop yelling. If you want a partner who's not sexy, if you don't want a partner who's not sexy, don't do things that create ugliness in the world, right? Speak kindly. Use your words well. You know, have a little bit of divine pride and like get dressed up. Like, look good. Get a haircut. Brush your teeth. Then you know what seeds to plant. Cancel all the things you don't want and then look around at how you're blocking yourself. Right? You're already blocking yourself. You didn't even realize you were blocking yourself. Right? So stop doing the things that are getting in your way. Then you will create the perfect image. And that's how you create a perfect paradise. And we'll pause there for today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, translators. I know these classes are difficult. We made it to 7 classes. That was quite a record. All right. Please keep coming. There is so much, like, if you crack this, code, like, you know, so much more is possible than you can even imagine. So thank you, translators. Thank you, tech. Thank you, hosts who's hosting today, Irina. Thank you for hosting today, Irina. Thank you, Gina, for getting up earlier, because Gina's here in Sedona visiting. So she had to get up earlier today to do the class. So thank you all very much. Tracy, love the glasses. I will join you in pink glasses. All right, everyone. Let's say goodbye to each other, please. And we'll see you soon. Oh, I forgot. Wait, we have Lam Rim in a half hour. Stay. Stay around. We're starting the emptiness chapter. I stayed up late last night translating. It's a lot of fun. All right, cool. If you're leaving, we'll see you soon. And we'll be back on Monday.
Thanks, Timla. We love you. Thank
That
you,
was
Tim.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Love you, Tim.
Thank you so
Gracias,
much.
maestro Tim. Por favor,
Thank you,
quédate para
Tim.
siempre.
Gracias,
Gracias,
Tim.
gracias.
谢谢老师，谢谢翻译老师。
谢谢老师，谢谢 Sharon，Thank you。
Gracias, maestro Tim. Por favor, quédate.
Thank you.
See you, see you in a couple minutes, and enjoy the music that Gina plays.